Welcome, everyone, to the US Cloud / Parex Extending the Power of Azure Anywhere with Azure Arc. Thank you for joining us today. While everybody's filing in and taking their seats, grabbing a drink, I'd like to kick things off. We are going to have an excellent presenter in Lance today, and we're going to go deep into this topic. We're going to pause on every slide. If you have questions, feel free to use the Q&A. Your microphones are muted because that would get a little chaotic with as many people as we expect. So go ahead and use the question and answer Q&A, and I will be reading those to Lance. We'll be going over those as we go through the presentation. So if you've got a question on a specific slide, then go ahead and ask it. You don't have to wait till the end. And we'll also have some general Q&A at the end of the presentation too. Eric, you want to put our first poll while we're waiting for everyone else to take a seat? All right, if you look over at the chat, if it didn't pop up on your screen, we have our first poll of the day. Are you actively using Azure Arc? We're going to get started in another minute or so. I see people are still filing in. Again, my name is Rod Fournier. I'm the manager of the Enterprise Architects at Parex. This is our presentation on extending the power of Azure Anywhere with Azure Arc. We have one of the best presenters in the universe, Lance, and he's going to go into everything. We're going to pause after every slide for question and answer. So go ahead and use the Q&A feature, question and answer feature of Teams. You won't be able to speak during this because it gets a little crazy, but go ahead and use that and pop your questions in there as we go along. And we'll also have Q&A at the end. So it looks like we've got a lot of responses to our poll. Thank you very much. We will have several of those to keep you awake. To keep things moving as we go. And I think we are ready to get going. So again, I appreciate your time and attendance, and I will now send it over to Lance.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Rodney. Hi, everybody, and welcome to our advisory hour, harnessing the power of Azure Arc and Azure Anywhere. My name is Lance Wade-Zunis. I'm an enterprise architect with Parex, and I'm thrilled to be guiding you guys through the exciting world of Azure Arc. A little bit about me. I've been in IT for well over 20 years now. I've been focusing almost solely on Azure for the last decade or so. And so I hope I can bring a wealth of knowledge and experience about not only the Azure platform, but Azure Arc in itself. In this session, we'll explore Azure Arc's capabilities, how it can benefit your organization. We'll talk about some of the key features, delve into various use cases, and discuss some best practices for effective implementation of Arc. Hopefully by the end of our session, you've got a solid understanding of what Arc is and how it can help you manage and secure your hybrid and multi-cloud environments seamlessly. So let's get started and unlock the power of Azure Arc together.
And we have a question that already came in, so I'll just feed this in there. Something to think about during the presentation, Lance, if you could. So someone asked, I would like to see what the use cases compared to on-prem solutions like Update Manager versus SCCM and Azure Monitor versus traditional monitoring solutions. So
sure, absolutely.
Think about as we go along. Thank you.
I appreciate that. And I saw another question come in too that, are we recording? Yes, we are recording. So we will have this available after the fact if you'd like to review. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about. We're going to start by talking about some of the challenges of hybrid and multi-cloud environments. Then I will introduce everyone to Arc, what it's capable of. We'll talk about Azure Arc-enabled servers, Azure Arc-enabled Kubernetes, and Azure Arc-enabled data services like SQL and PostgreSQL. Next, we're going to explore some use cases to see how Arc can be applied in real-world scenarios, speaking to one of those questions that just came in right there. I'll then provide an overview of Arc and some of the pricing and subscription options that are out there, which I'm sure a lot of folks are interested in looking at. And finally, we'll wrap up with some additional best practices for implementing Azure Arc effectively at the enterprise level. After that, we'll have a Q&A session where we'll follow up on some of those questions that come in throughout the presentation today. And then finally, do keep an eye out on chat. Like Rodney said earlier, we will be throwing some polls out there, and we can use those to help answer some additional questions as well. And that way you guys can kind of just see what everybody else is doing out there. So the challenge of hybrid and multi-cloud. Managing diverse environments is complex and complicated. Organizations typically have a mix of on-prem, cloud, edge, and IoT environments. Each environment has its own tools, its own processes, and its own management requirements. This diversity increases operational complexity and can lead to massive inefficiencies. Maintaining consistency across on-prem and multi-cloud and edge, it's difficult and it's complicated. And of course, compliance with regulations and standards becomes more complex as data and workloads span multiple locations and multiple clouds. Ensuring consistent policies, configurations, and updates across different environments is challenging to say the least. Inconsistent management can lead to security vulnerabilities and operational issues. Security and compliance become more challenging as your environment gets distributed across multiple locations. And of course, distributed environments increase the attack surface, making it harder to secure your data and applications. Having a lack of unified visibility and control is also a major issue. Without a centralized management solution, it's difficult to gain a comprehensive view of all of your resources. This lack of visibility can hinder troubleshooting, performance, optimization, and strategic decision-making. And that brings us to Azure Arc. Azure Arc simplifies the governance and management by extending the Azure control plane to various additional environments. This provides a unified management experience. For on-prem servers and virtual machines, Azure Arc allows you to manage and govern these resources as if they were straight in Azure. You can apply Azure policy and security controls consistently across all of your environments. When it comes to Kubernetes workloads, Azure Arc enables you to manage clusters, whether they're on-prem, in Azure, or living in other clouds. This simplifies the deployment, configuration, and monitoring of your Kubernetes workloads. When it comes to databases like SQL Server, PostgreSQL, and other relational databases, Azure Arc extends Azure's management capabilities directly to these databases, regardless of where they are. This ensures consistent security, compliance, and performance management. Finally, for edge devices like Internet of Things, Azure Arc allows you to manage and secure these devices, bringing cloud capabilities directly to the edge. This enables consistent operations and insights across distributed environments. So what Arc really does is it allows you to use the same tools and features, management, governance, oversight, monitoring, all of those awesome features that are built into Azure, and you can use them anywhere. It's a phenomenal tool to make sure that you have all of the same consistent management across your enterprise, regardless of where the resources live.
Okay, since you asked for more polls, we have another poll for you. Should pop up on your screen and in the chat.
Yep, this poll is very relevant to what we're about to talk about. So what does management of multi-cloud or hybrid cloud, what does it look like today? Simply put, it's overkill. You have multiple portals, multiple logins, various systems of governance, monitoring, identity, platforms, training, and knowledge. All of this basically muddies the job that your engineers and your admins have to do to run an efficient and a cost-effective environment. And of course, focusing on security, trying to secure your workloads across all of these various platforms is next to impossible. You have to hire a small army of engineers just to maintain an efficient multi-cloud approach. So what does Azure Arc bring to the table? Well, all of these various portals, all of this complexity, all of this overhead can be simplified. And this is what it should look like. Azure Arc brings all of those resources into a single pane of glass. Every resource is visible across multiple platforms in a single portal with a single login through the Azure portal. Resources are managed from the Azure Arc portal, regardless of where they physically or virtually reside. So this is what the Azure Arc interface essentially looks like. Instead of having to maintain all of these various platforms and portals and logins, everything is brought together in one centralized, again, single pane of glass for management, policy, and control of the resources.
And we've got a question on what level of permissions does someone need to view the screen?
So typically what you would want to use is your Azure RBAC, and we'll talk about how RBAC plays a role in Azure Arc. But you can apply granular permissions to users, either using a built-in or a custom RBAC role to ensure that your users only have visibility, for instance, read-only access to view the resources. But you can take it a step further with RBAC and apply management roles to users to do things like update management, Azure policy, Azure monitor, that kind of stuff. So it's really dependent on the title of the person coming in. But the beauty of using Azure RBAC is we can be as granular as we want with the permissions that are applied to the user. So let's talk about how Azure Arc works with Kubernetes. With Azure Arc, you can manage and govern Kubernetes clusters from a single control pane. This means you have a centralized interface to oversee all of your clusters, whether they're on-prem, in Azure, or in various other clouds. This unified approach simplifies operations and reduces the complexity of management across clusters that span multiple environments. Azure Arc allows you to deploy and manage configurations using GitOps methodologies. This approach leverages version control, and it allows you to store all of these configurations in a single Git repository if you want to approach things that way. By using GitOps, you ensure consistency and reliability in all of your deployments, as any changes are tracked and managed through version control, making it easier to roll back if you need to. Of course, enforcing compliance and security policies across your clusters is crucial. Azure Arc integrates directly with Azure Policy, and this allows you to apply and enforce policies consistently across all of your Kubernetes clusters. This helps maintain regulatory compliance and enhances your security posture by ensuring that all clusters adhere to the same set of rules and standards. So you create the guardrails once, all of your workloads conform to them regardless of where they live. Azure Arc also enables Azure Monitor to look and provide metrics for all of your workloads regardless of where they're running. It offers container insights and observability, giving you a detailed view of your cluster's performance and health. This integration helps you quickly identify and resolve issues, ensuring your applications run smoothly, again, no matter where they actually live. Let's talk about Azure Arc enabled data services. This is going to be your databases, SQL, Postgres, that kind of stuff. With Azure Arc, you can run Azure data services on-prem, at the edge, or in a multi-cloud environment. This flexibility allows you to deploy your data services where they make sense, where they're needed the most, or what's most affordable, whether that's close to your users in your own data center or spanning multiple clouds. Azure Arc brings the same features and benefits of Azure Platform as a Service data services to your on-prem environment. You can enjoy cloud innovations like scalability, elasticity, performance, and security all on your own infrastructure. This means you get the best of both worlds, power of Azure's cloud capabilities and the control of your own on-prem setup. One of the key advantages of Azure Arc is automated management. You can benefit from automated updates, backups, and high availability, which significantly reduces your operational overhead. This ensures your data services are always up to date and reliable without the need for constant manual intervention. Azure Arc also allows you to manage your data services directly from the Azure portal, providing a unified management experience. This centralized control simplifies operations and enhances visibility, making it easier to monitor and manage your data services across any environment. Let's talk about Azure Arc and how it works with Azure Local. If you are a newcomer to our advisory hours, welcome, obviously. But if you were here last time, we talked about Azure Arc as part of our advisory hour. So if you want to get some more information on on Azure Local. If you want to get some more information on Azure Local, please let us know, and we'll be happy to provide you with some details on what we talked about last time we got together. If you're not familiar with Azure Local is an extension of Azure into on-prem. It allows you to run physical Azure infrastructure in your own data center or your own facility, essentially connecting your on-prem environment directly into the Azure infrastructure. With Azure Arc, it allows you to have oversight and governance of all of these resources, just like they were living directly in the Azure cloud. Arc with Local allows you to integrate seamlessly with Azure Monitor, giving a unified view of all of your distributed virtual machines, Kubernetes clusters, and physical infrastructure. With Azure Local, you have the flexibility to scale and operate your distributed infrastructure using the Azure portal and all of the various APIs that Azure supports. Plus, you get to choose your hardware from your preferred vendors, ensuring you get the best fit for your needs, and of course, any relevant discounts that are applicable to your particular implementation. Most importantly, Azure Local enhances security by extending all of your cloud security features directly to your distributed locations. This protects your applications and your data against advanced threats using tools that are built right into the Azure portal. And again, all of this is controlled through a single pane of glass directly through Azure Arc. One major feature that clients look towards with Azure Arc is the ability to apply extended security updates to end of life or end of support operating systems. In this case, Windows Server 2012 and 2012 R2. With Azure Arc, it means that it's end of life, but not end of the road. So even though the server workloads have reached their end of support, your critical applications running on those operating systems can remain secure. Azure Arc enables you to receive extended security updates, or ESUs, for your Server 2012 or 2012 R2 operating systems. This ensures ongoing protection against emerging threats. This also means that you can continue to safeguard those legacy systems even after the official support period has ended. This also buys you some time in order to plan for eventual migration to another server operating system, but without having the immediate upfront capital expense of having to upgrade all of those operating systems. One thing to note is that ESUs are billed in arrears, and they start at the date the OS went out of support. So that means there might be a little bit of cost before the ESU was applied, but essentially it will catch itself up, and then you will continue getting those ESUs applied to those server operating systems. A question that just came in is, are ESUs an additional cost? Yes. Azure Arc in itself is not has some components that are free, and we'll talk about cost in just a little bit here. But extended support updates do have an additional cost associated with them, and that is an ongoing cost throughout the life of the extended security update. And that is billed per resource that has the ESU applied to it. But one thing to note, though, is this is pay as you go. So you're not having to pay large upfront fees to cover mass amounts of servers. You just purchase what you need, and those ESUs apply directly to those resources individually. So this provides some flexibility, and it avoids a lot of the large upfront costs associated with doing mass OS updates as large projects. This also allows you to maintain security on those workloads without having to essentially create proof of concept for migration to a new server operating system. So the process for ESUs is extremely straightforward. You onboard your servers into Azure Arc, and you enable the ESU through the Azure portal. Seamless integration, and it ensures that your servers are protected without significant disruption to your operations. So by keeping your legacy systems protected with ESUs, you maintain compliance and security posture. This gives you peace of mind knowing that your critical applications stay secure and up to date. So let's talk about some use cases. And this was a question that came up earlier, so we want to make sure that we spend a little bit of extra time talking about how Azure Arc is useful at various levels. One of the big use cases for Azure Arc is edge computing. And this is stuff like your Internet of Things or your actual like OT devices, machines in a factory, that kind of stuff. And we'll get into more specific applications with specific industries in a moment. But when it comes to edge computing, Azure Arc allows you to manage and monitor these devices directly at the edge. This enhances your real-time data processing and decision making and allows for quicker responses and more efficient operations. So imagine having hundreds of devices across the entire enterprise now fully visible and monitored in a single pane of glass. That's what Arc allows. It also allows for all of those great security features that you're already probably leveraging with things like Defender for Cloud to be applied to those devices, even though they exist outside of the Azure ecosystem. One other major use case for Azure Arc is the retail industry. So with retail, you're managing a lot of distributed devices and endpoints. Typically, stores are spread out, across the country or even across the planet. And so managing these point of sale systems and inventory applications can be very difficult, especially because they're often on different platforms or a mix of platforms and on-prem. Azure Arc allows you to ensure consistent operations and a seamless customer experience, no matter where your stores or your resources are located. You can diversify your resources across multiple clouds, enabling that magic multi-cloud DR and business continuity and availability position, while maintaining a single point of management and oversight right in the Azure portal. When it comes to manufacturing, Arc allows you to leverage the power of Azure portal and the Azure control plane and apply it to devices and workloads that typically aren't going to be cloud connected. So Arc allows you to monitor and control industrial equipment in factories, in various retail places where you may be sending product off to or having third parties work with you, and you can do this not just in a domestic situation, but because the Azure platform is global, we can spread this control across the entire planet. So by doing this, you can improve your operational efficiency and enable predictive maintenance. That's a big one right there. You can reduce downtime and increase productivity. We'll talk about some of those maintenance and predictability features when we talk about Azure Update Manager in just a minute, but that is a major feature of Azure Arc that allows you to essentially orchestrate your patch management directly through Azure Arc. When it comes to healthcare, Arc allows you to manage medical devices and patient data securely on-prem or across multiple clouds. This ensures compliance with healthcare regulations and enhances patient care by providing reliable and secure access to critical information regardless of where it lives. One last major use case that we'll talk about is Azure Arc and disaster recovery or business continuity. Arc allows you to extend your disaster recovery strategy to include both on-prem and multi-cloud resources. Enhances your resilience and minimizes downtime in the case of disruption, ensuring your operations can continue smoothly even in the face of unexpected events.
All right, so we've got a couple of more questions from the last slide. Someone said, is ESU distribution through my current process like WSUS? Just the entitlement is managed through Arc instead of Mac, when Mac is MAK.
Right, multiple activations. So when you apply ESUs at the Azure level, it's done through the Azure portal. And then that enables Azure Arc to do Azure Update Manager to orchestrate the patches back to those workloads. So if you're currently orchestrating via Windows Software Update Service or any other platform, Azure Arc would essentially take over for what those mechanics are doing, and it would shift to using Azure Update Manager to push updates to those Arc-controlled resources.
Okay, and the next one is, if we want to automate the health status of a service that runs on a server, like if the server stops and we would like to take the following actions, what Azure functions / features need to be used? Scenario is restart the service, check connectivity, restart the server, disconnect, connect to Azure again, generate ticket to the responsible region based on time frame, and regarding the alert mechanism, is this a feature like the suspend the alert based on dependency configuration, Or maybe I should ask, is there a dependency feature in Azure Monitor like we have on local monitoring solutions? Like if ICMP is not there, don't generate alert for other checks.
Okay, well, Rodney, I love nice, short, easy questions, so I really appreciate that one.
Yeah.
But you kind of answered your own question at the end there, in that Arc integrates with Azure Monitor. So anything that you can do via Azure Monitor, Arc can take advantage of. It can leverage those same like API calls, function app calls, logic app calls, runbooks, that kind of stuff. So if an Azure Arc enabled server triggers an Azure Monitor event, it can be handled the exact same way that you're handling it now, just like the resource was living in Azure, but the control plane is living in the cloud and talking back to on-prem, or even in another cloud like AWS or GCP. Again, love those nice short ones. Appreciate that.
And that was the last one for now.
Excellent. All right, so let's talk about Azure Arc pricing and subscriptions and how this all works in the checkbook. So Azure Arc is a pay-as-you-go service. We've kind of talked about this already, and you really only pay for what you use. This provides flexibility and cost efficiency, but this also means you can scale your usage up or down based on what your needs are without worrying about any upfront costs. Arc can also be licensed with a Server 2025 OS license. This is a cool new feature that Microsoft has introduced. So if you're licensing on-prem servers, you can actually use an option that automatically enables Azure Arc on those servers, allowing full functionality when you roll out a new on-prem workload, and it's turnkey when it integrates with the Azure portal. So everything that Azure Arc does can be automatically turned on your kind of net new rollouts of Windows Server OSs. Some of the things that Azure Arc does are completely free. Some features like Azure Policy for Kubernetes are completely free. Things like using searching and indexing via resource graph, or resource organization in the Azure portal via resource groups, Azure RBAC, and ARM templates and extensions are all completely free to use via Azure Arc. There's no additional licensing required for that. But some things that you do in Azure Arc do have a cost associated with them. One of the big ones is server management. This is based on a per server or per resource expense. It's flat rated. Depending on what you want to do, it's between $5 and $6 an endpoint. So it's not, ridiculously expensive, but it works for both Windows and Linux workloads. This offers a straightforward pricing model based on the number of managed servers. No other hidden fees or costs, or bandwidth, or anything like that associated with it. This makes it easy for clients to predict and manage costs. This also allows for the use of Azure Update Manager, which can orchestrate updates on, pretty much any Windows Server platform. Allows for the use of Defender for Server if you're licensed for it, which is a fantastic extension of Defender for Cloud. You can also leverage Azure Policy for GIST configuration, and that will allow you to implement change tracking and inventory of your resources. And now in preview, hot patching, which has been a very popular and frequent request. And that's currently in preview, allowing you to patch your resources if they're a supported operating system without reboots or having to take the machine down. And of course, one of the biggest features of server management is that integration with Azure Monitor and of course, Sentinel integration. So a lot of our clients who are using Sentinel, if you want to bring your Azure Arc workloads into that service, you'll need to add the server management extension or option to your Azure Arc workloads.
Okay, so we have another question that came in. Sorry,
go ahead.
Can you talk more about auto enrollment for new 2025 servers?
Sure. So that is a special option that Microsoft has released. I'm not quite sure when they came out with it, but it's new-ish. With Server 2025 and above, when you license your operating system through your vendor, there should be a new SKU that you can select that includes the Arc integration. And when you select that, it is automatically licensed for Azure Arc, including server management. And then once you onboard that Arc agent, it's automatically detected as an Arc workload, and it's brought into your normal Azure Arc portal right in the Azure portal. Pretty seamless, pretty neat option Microsoft is offering. And that's basically just a value add on top of the base Windows Server licensing cost. There is also a monthly cost that you can do with that as well. So if you're doing net new elsewhere, Microsoft has a very negligible cost of a kind of monthly licensing fee.
And then someone chained off of that and asked, is Azure Arc now a benefit of having SA on Windows Server licensing?
Yeah, so when you talk about software assurance and Azure, the biggest benefit of having existing software assurance or volume license center, multiple activation keys is the ability to use Azure Hybrid Benefit, which is actually called out on this slide. And so when you have the ability to take advantage of Hybrid Benefit, you can discount the cost of your Azure resources, which is great. It's always great to get a discount. But when you have software assurance, you do have the ability to add on those newer SKUs as part of your upgrade path. As to whether or not the Azure Arc features are included in SA paths, that's something we would have to look at as on a case-by-case basis. But highly likely, it certainly is something that we can look into individually for each client. So moving into additional pricing, when it comes to Kubernetes, you are priced on the number of vCores in the cluster. You do, and interestingly enough, this is another thing that was recently added, you get 6 for free, which is awesome, right? So if you want to try this out, you can load Arc and Kubernetes management into a 6-core Kubernetes cluster and see what it can do for you. But then beyond that, it's just based on the number of vCores, so the cost will scale with the cluster size, but you're only going to be paying for what you're using, which is great as your needs change and your workloads grow. Data services like SQL and PostgreSQL hyperscale are very similar to how Kubernetes is priced. It depends on the service tier. So as your service tier increases, the costs behind using Arc to manage those workloads may scale up as well. But again, this will provide flexibility to choose the right service and tier for your needs, allowing you to balance your performance and cost. And of course, we talked about it a moment ago, but Azure Hybrid Benefit and reserved instances are always available on Azure. And this allows you to apply a discount to your resources, basically just by promising Microsoft that you're going to use them, or by proving that you've already paid for or have the right to the server operating system. And one of the great things about working with US Cloud and Parex is that we have offerings in our proactive service catalog to help you assess your cost optimization and take a look at whether or not you're taking advantage of these. And if you're not, we can certainly help you implement them.
We have another question around, is hybrid join required with Entra? Can I manage standalone domains?
You can manage the server or resource identity really any way that you want. Azure Arc runs as an agent on the machine, so it does not necessarily require domain join, hybrid join, even registration. So it onboards the resource into Azure Portal via that agent, and then that's what facilitates that back and forth communication between the Azure control plane and the resource.
Then someone wants to know, is there any reporting for Azure Hybrid Benefits use beyond being able to apply the benefit?
There are some different reports that can be run against resources that are running in Azure to determine whether or not they have AHB enabled or applied to them. And that's certainly something that I would highly recommend opening up a ticket to kind of discuss that a little bit further and talk about some of the options that we have to help you determine whether or not you've got your environment cost optimized. Okay, moving along. So let's talk best practices. We're going to just go over kind of what the typical workflow is for considering Arc and then implementing it, and then making sure that you're getting the most out of it as it continues to evolve in your environment. We always recommend starting with a pilot project. You want to start small and kind of cut your teeth on the resource and make sure that you're doing it the right way before you scale it up. This ensures a smooth transition and allows you to create your processes internally so that you can sort of document and templatize these rollouts as they continue to evolve. We want to always plan your resources and their organization. Using Azure resource groups and tags, this helps you organize all of your Arc-enabled resources effectively and helps you differentiate between what lives natively in Azure and what might be living in, AWS, GCP, on-prem, that kind of thing. It helps maintain a clear and manageable structure for all of your resources and makes it easier to manage and locate them because your footprint in Azure could grow pretty considerably when you start onboarding Azure Arc resources. And so we want to make sure that there's some way to tell them apart other than just maybe a little different icon on them. We always suggest and recommend security first, okay? Think security first. So implement a strong authentication and authorization mechanism, whether this be backing it with Entra and MFA or Duo or whatever, Okta, whatever source you choose. Make sure that you are providing the correct levels of AAA to these resources. This will ensure that only authorized users have access to your resources, and that'll enhance your security and protect your data. And obviously, one major feature that you can leverage is Azure Arc. And with that said, you want to leverage Azure policy. So you want to define and enforce your policies for security, compliance, and governance, and do this right off the bat or as early as possible. These are the guardrails for growth. This helps maintain consistency and adherence to your organizational standards, and it ensures your environment remains secure and compliant as it grows without having to constantly go hands-on to rein things in. And lastly, monitor and optimize your workloads. Azure Monitor is a powerful tool, and it allows you to gain insights into the performance and health of all of your Arc-enabled resources. This enables proactive management and optimization of your environment. It helps you identify and resolve issues before they are allowed to become a problem. So that basically brings us to the end of the content part of our discussion today. I'm going to hand things over to Rodney now. He's going to wrap us up and lead us into our Q&A session. So Rodney, please take it over and talk about all the things I've talked about.
Thanks, Lance. That was a great presentation. So we've got some next steps. We're going to put up a slide here in a little bit to give you options on advisory hours in the future so you can vote on your choices. Some of the takeaways are obviously that we can help you with this whole process, right? We've got a lot of experience in that. We've got professionals that can help you. So just open up a ticket if you need any of that. And we appreciate your time. So let's go right into, I had a really good question that came out. Lance. So to confirm, and our poll is up there for the next ones. So to confirm, if I onboard Azure Arc Kubernetes on my on-premise Kubernetes cluster, am I billed on the number of cores or the number of nodes? Did you catch that one, Lance?
Yeah, sorry, man. My Teams is just going absolutely crazy right now.
I saw that.
So I'm just trying to get us back to the right slide. There we go. Hey, it wouldn't be a fun US Cloud Parax presentation without a little bit of a hiccup, right? Okay, say again. What was the question?
So the question is, if someone onboards an Azure Arc Kubernetes cluster on their on-premise Kubernetes cluster, am I billed the number of cores or the number of nodes? What's the billing process?
Kubernetes will always be billed in the number of cores. So you get 6 for free. So if you onboard 100 cores, you're going to get billed for 100 minus 6. So 94 cores is what you'd be billed for. It is not based on the number of clusters. It's just based on the number of active cores that are running. What else we got?
Nothing at the moment. So if you look at the chat, you should see our poll. Thank you for those who've already answered. Go ahead and answer that. And I'm not seeing any of the questions right now. So you will get a copy of the presentation. This has been recorded. It will be sent out to you. Someone asked about, will we send out the pricing? So that's going to depend upon your licensing agreement for the various component trees and who you get those from. We have another question that just came in. Can you touch on the Defender enrollment and how it works?
So when you onboard into Azure Arc, if the server resource is or the subscription has Defender for Servers enabled, that functionality is automatically turned on for the Arc resources. And Azure Arc supports Defender for Servers Plan 1 and Plan 2, so whichever you've authorized or paid for in your subscription, those resources are enabled in the same way. One thing to note, if you're paying for Azure Arc, you won't be double billed for a resource node or a resource utilization for a server that's using Defender for Servers on Arc. It's just one or the other.
Then someone asked, can you talk about the different methods to enroll VMs, so virtual machines, into Arc? I have found that enrolling one way doesn't automatically grant you all the features you would if you've enrolled a different way.
Yeah. So the most important part, and it's very case by case because I think everybody does it a little bit differently, is getting the agent on the machine and then getting the resource registered in Arc. So any combination of doing that typically will be successful, but usually we recommend having the agent deployed first and then having it onboarded into Arc afterwards. That way, sort of that foundational communication system back into Azure is already in place and ready to go. And then you may, with on-prem especially and multi-cloud, you may run into some communication kind of roadblocks too. So there's some documentation that Microsoft has out there that can talk about, what ports and IPs and all that stuff need to be visible back and forth. So there might be a little bit of firewall magic that needs to happen on one end or the other, just to make sure everybody's kind of talking to each other without anything in the middle.
Someone asked in the chat, is there any resources to get some, like more in the weeds, examples of some of the high level topics being discussed, trying to compare cost of Arc plus additional cost with return on investment or ROI?
And that's an excellent question, and actually kind of leads into our last slide. Rodney and I have been working together to develop some options for our clients that we're working with. And we've got two great options that we can talk about. Rodney, do you want to talk about what we've been putting together a little bit?
Yes, if you're not familiar, we've got a great portal at US Cloud where you go in and you can see your ticket and all the information. Underneath frequently asked questions, we have the proactive services catalog. We have two offerings from this advisory hour on Azure Arc that you can find in there that'll start the conversation to get you where you need to go on where you're at in your journey with Azure Arc. So those are available through the proactive services catalog underneath the frequently asked questions section of the US Cloud portal, or just simply open up a ticket or talk to your technical account manager or your DSD if you have one. So we've got another follow-up question on what if you use the standalone Microsoft Defender P1 license and it's not through Azure Defender?
Well, that is an excellent question. And, if we had an option to go over licensing, that'd be a great advisory hour. Oh, one person wants it. I wonder if it was the same person who submitted that question. So when it comes to Defender for Cloud, that licensing is specific to Azure resources, whether they be native in Azure or Azure Arc. So you'll need to make sure that you have the correct Defender for Cloud servers P1 or P2 license to take advantage of all of the various features that Arc enables on the workloads. But as long as you have that license, whether it was purchased standalone or as part of something else, the Azure Arc resources onboarded into Defender will automatically be enabled for that functionality.
Okay, I want to thank you again for joining the presentation and the excellent questions. Really good back and forth. I appreciate that today. And we will see you at our next advisory hour. Thanks again, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.